Good evening, everyone. It is February 11th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and this is the Sherborn Zoning Board of Appeals. This is a continuation of the public hearing of 41 North Main Street Pine Hill Residences. This is a remanded public hearing, which was already denied to hack, and so that's sort of where we are now. I apologize, I don't have the sheet in front of me. I just checked into my hotel, so I'm a little late to the game tonight. At that request, though, I think there's been some new developments for 41 North Main, and I also know that my board member would like to say a few words. So, Rick, I don't know if you want me to sort of open the Gene, your hand is raised.
It's also a continuation of Brush Hill.
Yes, we will do that. We'll
Okay. All right. I just wanted to make sure.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate the reminder. So I know there's been a bunch of developments. Rick, I know you asked to sort of have a few moments to talk. I don't know if you want to wait till after we go through what's been updated from the development team, or you want to sort of open with your sort of perspective.
I'd like to open if I could, Mr. Chairman.
Sure. The floor is yours. I'm going to go off camera for 2 seconds while you talk, but I will be listening. So.
Okay. And Zach and I did not arrange this, but it is convenient for him. I think we've been talking a lot about a lot of the detail on 41 North Main, and those are sort of the trees. And I think we need to step back and look a little bit at the forest here. I've been in the real estate development business for over 44 years and in town for almost 40. And it seems that this project has had various challenged proposals for about 20 that I can recall. And a lot of those proposals were before this developer and before this development team, proposed by other people who were good people, supported by a good legal and other supports. And, you know, I want everybody to remember that at one point there was water going to come down Main Street. That was the proposal for this site. And I'd like to suggest that those smart people who were prior developers would not have proposed that if there was lots of good water up on the hill off Hunting Lane. And there was another proposal to have the septic all go under Main Street and be under the town baseball fields. And likewise, that did not proceed. But likewise, if there was a great septic field right next to the restaurant's well, that would not have been proposed. And when this project, an earlier version of this project came before this board in 2021, we turned it down based on traffic and water availability. That project had a very expensive but also very effective wastewater treatment plant up on the hill. And HAC, I think, wisely remanded to us and said, okay, well, give them a chance to come back to you on traffic, septic, and water. And so now it's back. And we've had no progress at all on water. And the fact that in 4 years, the developer has not taken any opportunity, so 4 pretty wet years, taken any opportunity to do any water testing, at least to me, strongly implies that he knows what the neighbors suspect, which is there isn't enough water to support this project or even a remotely comparable project on that hill. And so I'm very deeply disappointed that the development team has done nothing on the water side. On traffic access, I think they did something very remarkable, which is finally admit that any material project here has to have an access directly out onto North Main Street, right at that intersection, and that the intersection needs to be rebuilt. And I think they were also pretty candid that the price tag for that is around $750,000. They have been less forthcoming about where that money is coming from. Now, if you eliminate the wastewater treatment plant up on the hill, that gets you about $600,000, but not enough for the intersection. And eliminating the wastewater treatment plant on the hill leads to the biggest new fatal flaw for this project, which is a septic system on top of a public water supply for a restaurant. And we've heard various explanations that, well, the well was discontinued, or the state maps were wrong, or, well, yeah, it's in the prohibited area, but if you look at the water, it actually goes a different direction. Um, I find those arguments unbelievable, and I do not believe them. I think there is a very serious problem there. So those three problems add up to one giant risk, which is if we grant a conditional approval for this project, we all know that the permit will get flipped to some naive out-of-state developer who will, and in 6 months, that developer will be right back in front of us, claiming, with the usual developer puppy dog eyes, that they had no idea that there was no water, that they had no idea that the town was not going to rebuild the intersection for free, and that they had no idea that there was any problem with building a septic system on top of the well for the restaurant. And so I think it is, whether we grant this conditionally or deny it outright, I think we owe it to the town and any successor owner of the property to be extremely clear on the development challenges here. Otherwise, someone will claim they did not know, and we all know. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Thank you, Rick. I appreciate that perspective. And I will say, before I'm going to say something that the development team will not like, I want to thank the development team for their efforts in providing with the additional information. However, I will say that to Rick's point, at this juncture, I feel like this project remains fatally flawed for the reasons that Rick described, which is that you are trying to put a massive septic system next to another septic system in a public water supply buffer zone. There has been no meaningful work with respect to the wells. I think that, and instead of, I would say, continuing to taint the entire flavor of the recent proposal with the fatal flaws that remain, and this is a rhetorical question, and I'm going to let the development team speak, but I think that the most gracious thing to do for our time, as I am on a work trip and did not anticipate this happening tonight, we're volunteers. There are fatal flaws. There are fatal flaws that cannot be conditioned and cannot be corrected as currently proposed. And so I would suggest that we think, again, the development team can respond. I would hope substantively first, but then to this point, do you withdraw the application and come back when you fix those flaws, or do you leave us to essentially stop wasting our time and close the public hearing in the near future and deny this and remand it back to HAC? Because I'm telling you right now, there's no way that the septic system you have proposed is going to go in where you propose it. That is a first order of business. And there is no water at the moment. So I don't know why we're still here. And I'm going to stop talking now because I think I'm going to say too much on a public hearing. But I'm going to sort of go to my board to see just where your sentiments are with John and Todd. And then I'm going to go to the development team, because I do know you spent some money and I know you put in some effort, but I do think we have remaining fatal flaws. So John and Todd, I want to get your quick perspectives before we go to the development team here. You're on mute, John.
I concur with everything that you and Rick just said. I am very skeptical about whether there is adequate water for this site, and there has been no effort made to demonstrate that there is an adequate water supply. Water is a major issue, and we said that as soon as this came back to us, and there hasn't been any effort to show us that it's been fixed. And the septic is, as you say, Zach, extremely concerning, and I would not approve the septic as proposed. The second large septic system adjacent to a public water supply, it's just not safe. So I concur with what you all have said, and I agree that nobody's time should be wasted.
Yeah, or money at that matter. Todd.
I don't have anything substantive to add to the discussion, but I would just say that I agree with my esteemed board colleagues and with your comments, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Sorry to put a negative tone on this, but Lynn, I'm going to defer to you and Paul now to talk about sort of the updates and then decide, we can talk about what you've provided to us of late. I do see, Paul, as a matter of hygiene in the public record, maybe this is our fault for not posting it, but I see the last letter of extension for the public hearing looked like it was only till the end of January. I don't see anything else in our record for this particular matter, so I just wanted to.
It's posted. It's just it's posted a little bit out of order. It's hard to find, but it's posted.
I apologize.
He gave it to us.
Crappy Wi-Fi on the airplane this morning was not helpful to me. So.
Well, thank you, Lynn Sweet, LDS Consulting Group. We're really feeling the love. We love the warm welcome this evening. So I'm just going to get right down to it, since it sounds like that's what the board wants to do as well. I'm joined this evening by Brian Giovannini of the Geo Group, Mike Fabiano from High Point Engineering, attorney Paul Haverty, who you know well, of Haverty, Blattman, Bobrowski, and Silverstein, and our client, Gary Labarsky. We came into this process a number of months ago with a sincere effort of reducing the project considerably from what the board originally saw. We have worked diligently throughout this process to bring additional information to the board. Certainly, it is your opinion as to whether or not that information is enough to satisfy your concerns. However, we have submitted, and we apologize, we had some illness with some of our team members of the lateness in our submissions, but we are going to have Brian Giovannini talk about his memo. This is his area of expertise with regard to wells. This is what he does every single day. We did go ahead and do the soil testing for the septic and for the stormwater as we had promised and were required to do. We understand that there are no concerns there. That paperwork has been turned in. We also have responded to the latest comment on the stormwater management. And again, we don't see any issues there that we can't overcome down the road. Previously, we had responded on the traffic, and we have said all along and maintain, and we know that this is going to be debated in the court system, that the developer has done what they need to do at this particular point in time on the well. Again, we're not going to go into it. So I'm going to turn the discussion over to Brian to go through his letter for the record, and then whether or not Mike wants to talk about stormwater or not. And then, we're certainly happy to have you, close the hearing after that. Thank you.
Chair. My name is Brian Giovannoni with the Geo Group out of Middleborough, Massachusetts. You received a letter, my little memo, and I was brought in to look at and to take a peek at what's going on between the properties at 33 and 41 North Main Street in town, and lots of different things that I looked at. I looked at where water comes from, where it's going to derive its origin from, and different ways I was looking at it. I've looked at it. I've been doing this for almost 35 years. This coming June will be my 35th year. I've got a degree from Northeastern. I'm a professional engineer. So I've been doing this. My zones 2, which are the delineation of where water for wells come from, are featured on MassGIS to various communities throughout southeastern Mass. So I've been doing this for a long time, and I was really looking at, let's look at it from the simplest standpoint. Where is the water coming from for a 3.5 gallon per minute well that has been bored in the bedrock? That's what I was looking at to start with. So I went through and I reviewed all the documents that were readily available to me, including where the well was located, where the septic system for 33 is located, where the septic system is proposed at 41. And the things that I noted were The well at 33 itself, that was put in 1985, approved thereafter by DEQ at the time, DEP now. They turned around and gave approval for it, and even stated make sure you maintain that 100-foot radius. That was the first thing. That was back in 1986. Today, there is an interim wellhead protection area that's a standard. If there is no zone 2 that's defined for a well, automatically, depending upon the type of well it is, it starts at 400, goes to 500. But it's a formula. Usually, it's 400 feet to, plus 30. Pretty much 30 feet times the flow rate, which would be another 100, which matches up with the 500 that is currently on there. But that's because it's a it's a non-community transient public water supply. When I looked at it and saw where the water, where's the water coming from? The water's coming from deep. That's why they drilled 272 feet into bedrock. This isn't a shallow aquifer well. This isn't sipping water off the top of the rock. As when you look at the soil profile, you have this profile of all the land above the rock. Well, the well is down below. Inside goes down into that rock, and that's where it's getting its water. It's deriving it down below.
Can I just ask you a quick question for clarification, for my understanding while you're talking about this well? We're talking about the well for Rustic, right? Not Rustic, excuse me, Fireside, the restaurant next door. And
Yes.
The well is about 275 feet deep. Is that roughly what I recall from my quick scan?
Oh, 272 feet.
And that was
272.
not, and just so, again, I'm clear, that was drilled, was there fracking to get that 13.5 gallons per minute, or that was a natural sort of 13.5 gallons a minute at that depth?
They turned around and they drill down to the depth, and they try to locate water. Is when they drill a well in bedrock.
I know, I'm very familiar with how the
Oh,
process
okay.
works, as well as
Okay.
when it goes, as well as when it doesn't produce water. So that's why I'm just
Right.
clarifying that I'm asking whether or not it was fracked to get that level of flow, or that was a natural flow, because that's obviously, if you're drilling only 275 feet and getting 13.5 gallons a minute, that's pretty good, in my experience and my layperson's knowledge and my own experience. So I just want to clarify that there was not extra work done to get that 13.5. I just want to clarify for the lay people where we're at here.
And exactly, and thank you for that clarity. I sometimes forget when I explain this stuff that not everyone has been doing this as long as I have. I apologize.
No, don't
but yeah.
apologize. As a general counsel of a technical company, my job is to bring it up a level every day. So you're doing your job,
Awesome.
And I'm doing mine. So
Thank you. So the water is coming from deep down and below. The well was cased 40 feet, sealed, it was grouted. So you've got a situation where you have the shallow aquifer sitting on top. You got this about 20 feet. That's all there is. There's only 20 feet of soil before you get to the bedrock. And then you have this well that goes down. It goes down 272 feet to get to that water. That water then arises up in the column that the hole that was drilled, that 8-inch hole that was drilled up into that column, and they pump out of that column. Now, what we have here is you have a septic system 433, the restaurant and inn, that property there, their septic system, which is 170 feet off of their own well. Then you have the septic system that is being proposed at 41, which is even beyond that, about 250, 260 feet. There from the well itself at 33. So you've got a couple of things going on where the water that goes into this aquifer, where does it flow to? It flows east to west from Main Street. That's based on the gradients that we've seen, the water table, deep hole tests that were conducted. So we kind of know that it's gradient. The gradient is going off towards the railroad tracks, from Main Street to the railroad tracks. So anything that comes in there, gravity pulls it in that direction. And that's why we keep talking about the water's flowing east to west. That's just gravity pulling it in that direction. And then I believe on the other side of the tracks, there's a wet area. It's just naturally making its way over there. And then it flows north, I think, at that point. So that's kind of how I was looking at where's the septic going to go when the septic at 41, where does the septic at 33 go? When you're putting the septic into the water table, the first thing you do is locally, you will raise the water table. It's not a lot, but it will raise it up. So what ends up happening is you have these two competing septic systems that are pushing water towards each other, and then it's going to go with gravity east to west towards the railroad tracks. So that's where we were looking at. The water from 41. Where is it going to go? The septic water, where is it going to go? That's where I was looking at this project. And I mean, I was going through it at depth, trying to find every little piece that we had available to us, and I thank the town, because the town had septic plans and et cetera for 33 that was readily available to us. And I appreciate that, because half of the time you don't have that information, and you're trying to, you have to do deep hole tests all over the place trying to find more information. So we had that information, and that's where we came up with this. When I was looking at this, where the water's going, it's going east to west. It's not going into a well heading south, because gravity's pulling it to the west. You also have another septic system, their own septic system, that is located on their property, that their septic would be in their own well if that was a problem. Their septic would be in their own well if that was the big problem. So with this water going east to west, that's where we looked at this, and that's why I when I looked at that, I kept going back to, what other way could we look at this? Unless you defined a zone 2, which there isn't a zone 2 defined for this. You have to really kind of go back to where does the water go? And when we define zone 2, that's exactly what we do. We look at where the water is actually flowing from and getting to that well, and how it gets there. We used to call a thing called "I'm a little raindrop," and you go, where does the raindrop go, and wherever it flows, and that's how we do these analyses. It's computerized, but it's also we use common sense. It doesn't make sense that it's going in that direction. So that's how we came up with these this little memo that we've come up with here with our summary.
Brian, can I just ask you a quick question here?
Yes.
When you say that it's flowing from east to west and then north, we're talking about it flowing into a wetland and then into a stream, correct?
I believe at some point it goes across the tracks, and like water anywhere, it's gonna finally
Right.
daylight at some location. I don't know where it locates, but it goes across towards the tracks.
Yeah, there's a brook that crosses right by those tracks, about 20 feet from it. I walk that on a regular basis. And I just want to confirm, and I'm going to ask my board, sorry, just to my own understanding, and I'm going to ask Rick. Actually, I'm going to ask Rick, because he has his hand raised, because he wants to answer my question. Is this a nitrogen sensitive area, Rick, in your perspective, because of the wetland, or not really?
I think it's nitrogen sensitive only because of the public water supply, but
Okay.
that's not really my area of expertise. What concerns me about what Mr. Giovanni was telling us is he's mixing apples and oranges, which is the restaurant has a restaurant operation in, I think, 3 bedrooms, and the proposed new system has 56 bedrooms, and I think that difference is material.
Yeah, I think it's very material. I mean, so sorry, Brian, please, Mr. Giovanni,
So,
Giovannini.
It's Giovannoni. It's okay.
Giovannoni,
It was American.
sorry.
It was Americanized in the early
I've got a lot
1900s.
of screens. I probably need to adjust my prescription. I cannot read everything right now.
It's okay. You guys are closer than most people, which is awesome. So looking at that, you have a septic system for 33 that is at 5,225 gallons a day. The septic system at 41, and I don't have that number directly in front of me. I'd almost go back to Mike, Mike Fabiano, if you have that number.
9,500?
9,500, yes. So it's about 40% larger.
And all human waste septic flow, as opposed to the restaurant, is going to be a lot of restaurant food waste, which is different and maybe easier or maybe harder, but in terms of nitrates and things like that, I don't think the flows are the same, gallon to gallon.
Well, one of the interesting things about restaurant waste is it's very high BOD. And what happens with very high BOD septage is it's
Can you
very
explain the acronym for
the
folks?
biological oxygen demand. That's what it is the type of waste that it is. It requires a lot of oxygen to be processed. And one of the issues is what you have for nitrogen in there does not process well with a high BOD. I looked at the possibility of creating a denitrification septic system on 33 and convert it. They allow it down the Cape for just 2-3 years, but there's nothing as a permanent solution. And the biggest problem they have with there's a program called Sludge Dog is one of the acronyms they have down there. And the problem with it is that it's only good for household, because when you have the high BOD, the nitrogen processing does not work. So what happens is the higher BOD, the nitrogen that's in it, doesn't get processed out like it would naturally as it naturally goes through the breakdown process.
So to recap, just simply, so there's an existing condition that this board has no control over at this point with respect to the infrastructure that is loading the ground in that immediate area with nitrogen is what I'm hearing. Did I play that back right?
Pretty much.
Okay. So there's a condition that we can't control that's exacerbating the problem that you all have to face and deal with.
Okay,
right?
so
Which is the nitrogen loading, right? This is the issue. So,
well, the loading, but where does the nitrogen go? The nitrogen's in the water, the septage water, and where does the septage water go?
right, and I think right. So and just I don't know where you are in terms of your familiarity, but my understanding is they want to put wells on the other side of those tracks that drew down the wetlands. So that to me seems like a problem, but that's my ad lib. So
I'm not aware of that. I will. It's not something that I was looking into. I was looking more at the septage and where septage was flowing, and the well itself, to make sure that where things are going. So I am not aware of location of well. I know there wasn't a well on the site at 41, because I was looking to see if there was any type of a well on that location to see if that would be affected. Because if it was closer to a different area, I was looking at all conditions on that. And then I was looking for anything else that I could find if there was a septic anywhere else in the vicinity. But that's the key one that I was looking at was 33.
I appreciate the perspective and the information. And just to recap and tell me if I'm missing something, anyone who can correct me, which I'm sure there will be someone who can, that the well, I think that the applicant team has actually asked for an extension of a notice of intent to continue testing of the well head that was put in the wetlands across the railroad tracks. And so that is continues to be the plan. There is no new proposal for a well location. And I think that what you're describing is that the effluent and the nitrogen's flowing in that direction in a nitrogen sensitive area. Am I missing something? Development team or board members, correct me if I'm mischaracterizing where I think we are. I see a head nodding from Rick. No, so I'm going to assume that means I'm not wrong, at least grossly wrong. I don't see anything from Paul or Lynn, and Mr. Labarski.
So you're asking, are we changing the location of the wells? And the answer to that is no.
Okay.
Is that it seemed like there were 3 or 4 questions in there. So what are the rest of them?
Yeah, so we can unpack it. So it's sort of it's not that hard though, right? I mean, we're talking about water flowing from septic systems, existing and proposed, in an westerly direction, which is going to be, if not it already is, a nitrogen sensitive zone because there's an existing well buffer, and then you want to put an additional well in the wetlands across the tracks in the direction of the septic flow. Rick.
Well, we're also brushing over another key item, which is the reason everybody does these bedrock wells is to get water out of the cracks in the bedrock that have been there for the last 350 million years. And as we've discussed on this project and others, nobody has a map of where those cracks go. But if you build your septic system right over a crack and it leads directly to someone's well, that's a bad fact. So the water does not just stay in that upper level. It goes down too. I agree that the lateral flow east-west will probably predominate, but it's not like it's sitting there on a tarp.
Right.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
one of the things that's noted is if you look at the DEQE approval of the well, you do have 4 inches of till, 4 feet of till sitting on top of the bedrock. Till is between the bedrock and the till. That's what really gives you a really confined aquifer, which keeps things separated. Now you may have a leaky confined aquifer. I understand what you're thinking. It might be a leaky confined where you might have some something coming through. But what happens is the predominant flow is the predominant flow across the site. I understand, you're right. Bedrock wells, there's been theories that bedrock wells can come from 30 miles away, the water. And you're right. The exact science on it is cracked. If I can be humorous for a second, it's cracked a little bit. But what we look at is where do we our best ability to define where water is coming from and where it's going to go.
Thank you, Brian. And I'm not going to try to mess up your last name again. So, is there anyone else from the applicant team? Actually, let me start with this. Board members, any questions for Brian?
No.
Okay. Applicant team, do you have any other information you'd like to share or discussion? I'd like to sort of assess where we are, sort of given the statements already made. So,
Can we ask for Mike Fabiano? I just want him to give a couple of
Yes,
updates on the
please.
civil end, please.
Sure. Thanks, Lynn. Mike Fabiano with High Point Engineering, the record civil engineers for the project. So the update I'd like to provide on 2 fronts. We did perform septic system testing that was completed last week, and it was witnessed by the Board of Health. We have submitted the appropriate form work as of this morning, which is Form 11 and Form 12 and a map. So a package has been submitted. It's not a design package. It's basically an accounting of what happened in the field that was witnessed, per a CMR rule that we need to submit that paperwork within 60 days of testing, and that piece is completed. The second piece is specifically regarding stormwater. We have a second go around for a response to comments. I think I'll simply say that we have substantially accepted all comments, that they would be completed in a fashion prior to final plans being completed. So we tried to provide enough detail through the remaining items and the new items that were related specific to the MS4 comments. We are accepting all federally regulated mandates that the town is required to do based on a federal requirement. And then I believe that the MS4 related comment as it relates to waivers is specifically with Chapter 25 in the Comprehensive Stormwater Regulations. So there's comments in there that said the Chapter 25 waiver request is still in place. However, when it comes to federally regulated or mandated sections, that we're accepting those provisions in place. The only comment I believe that remained outstanding, there was one comment by Tetra Tech, the peer reviewing engineer, where one of the underground systems was commented that they wanted to add an isolator row, and we just respectfully disagreed with that was a necessary add-on, for that particular system. So in general, we accepted. However, there's a comment, it basically says prior to final plans being completed, and then there's a detail providing what we'd be doing to accept that comment.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate that. And high level, can you just tell me, I know they're unofficial results. We're not going to hold you to it. And I'm not, necessarily trying to create any kerfuffle between you and the Board of Health. But if you could just tell us, in your professional opinion, which we all know is not necessarily certain, what your experience was during the testing this past week.
I think the testing more or less confirmed what we were expecting based on prior records. Till groundwater, there was some discussion in the field about where to put the modeling, for where high groundwater was, but it was moving around in a very short band, within the property. I think one of the 4 test pits produced longer than expected results, but overall, it didn't substantially change the intent of a future system. Excuse me. Coughing, gagging. I'm getting over being
I'm in the
sick.
same boat. That's why I keep going on mute.
Got stuck in my
I got the
throat.
same
Sorry
thing.
about that. So the system, there will be similar to the 33 North Main Street. There's an expectation that there's going to be a mounded system as far as grade goes. There's definitely some modifications that will happen in final design, but overall, we didn't see any indication that there was enough substantial risk from the test pits that would say that the project was not going to work. Change, yes, but as far as
depth to groundwater, you thinking you need a waiver from local regs, or would you need to raise it?
I don't know that I can answer that directly.
You probably can't yet.
Waiver from,
But
yeah.
I just didn't know if it was that obvious. If it's on the line, obviously you have to model it. But
Yeah, I think I think the elevation in that area is going to go up, as far as a final grade goes, in order to create separation and whatnot compared to where things are at. I mean, it is till we had a decent sized machine. There was a lot of digging going on that day, and there's frost on top of it to get through, so it wasn't the best of conditions in winter conditions to to do the type of testing. But I think it was successful from a get it done and before this board meeting.
and appreciate the efforts there. I see some board of health members' hands are raised. So before I go to that, I just want to make sure that the development team is sort of closed out their perspective on this issue before I go to the board of health members whose hands are raised. Mike, anything? Lynn, anything?
No.
Okay. Daryl.
Okay, I'd just like to ask Mark Oram if he could summarize very quickly the observations in the field. I don't believe that our local regulations for depth to groundwater will be met.
And I'd be glad to speak on that. My name's Mark Oram. I'm the Sherborn Board of Health agent, and I would like to note that we were out there last week and we found modeling anywhere from 41 inches, 60, 35 inches. So anything in the range of 35 to 41 inches and 44, they will not meet the local Board of Health codes. Those groundwaters were found within the first 5 feet of material from the top of ground and will not meet the requirements at the local level. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate that perspective. Andrea, do you still have your hand raised? I can't quite see where my screen is right now.
I do. I was going to turn on my
Oh, I see you now.
Okay. So, all right. Some of you don't know me. I'm an LSP. I have to quite frequently evoke my groundwater hydrology background for contaminated groundwater plumes, which is not dissimilar to a septic system situation. And I'm very concerned about the project and the management of the septic waste. And I have several issues. I won't get to them all, I promise. But one is that if the groundwater flow direction was evaluated by looking at the groundwater elevations of the wells from the 1985 study for the 33 North Main. Those wells are all in one straight line. You can't, groundwater is three-dimensional. You can't determine groundwater flow with wells that are in a straight line. So you need, at the very least, you need 3 triangulated wells. But so, you know, so there's that. Also, all right, well, let's assume for a moment, well, also there's a hill, bedrock controlled hill immediately to the north, which would suggest that groundwater could flow southerly and toward 33. So we really don't have a good groundwater flow direction assessment. But let's assume for a minute that it does flow westerly. Once you start pumping that huge volume of septic into the septic system, you will get a mounding effect, and the waste from there will flow radially away and will, you know, and there will be a component that flows southerly toward the abutters, the 33 abutters to the south. And also, you know, as much as we'd like to think that groundwater follows, that the, you know, that all the contaminants will follow the groundwater the way it flows, that's unfortunately not the case. Much to our chagrin, when we're working on cleanup sites, we often find, due to dispersion and diffusion and, you know, other chemical reasons, that the groundwater, that the contaminants will actually migrate uphill, up gradient. So this is, you know, this is not a controlled, this is not a situation. When I look at the the map that was shown, I'm getting flashbacks of a president with a Sharpie telling us where the storm is going to go, you know, against the reports of the weather people. Anyway, I'm not feeling it.
All right, thank you, Andrea. Just one more moment, and I think we're gonna close this issue out.
Okay, I know. I was going to make a point that Rick made. That when, you know, if it does flow to fractures, it very well could impact wells. And I don't know. I guess I'm done.
Thank you, Andrea. Appreciate
Thank you.
the perspective, and Mark and Daryl, as always, for joining. I know this is extracurricular for your already volunteer activities, so appreciate it. I think, you know, one concern I have is if the fact that the septic's going to be mounted, it looks like it's under the driveway entrance. That seems to be a practical problem potentially, but that's just another issue that I see. So I guess, you know, I think there seems to be a bunch of open holes. I don't want to put the development team in a, you know, prejudicial situation where you can't come back or you have to waste more money going to hack. But at the same time, I think that there's a lot of open issues here. And so I just don't know that, you know, we are addressing them at the speed that the board would like to see, and at the completeness that the board would like to see. And so I would like to sort of hear from my board sort of where they are on this issue, because I think there's a lot of ground to cover before we can even get to an approval. And I think we've made that clear. So I just want to see what the board has to say in terms of what they would think they would like me to do, or what we should vote on, or how we should proceed, because I just think there's a lot of ground to cover here. Board members, any comments, perspectives?
Well, I think that we should close the hearing and take a vote tonight.
To close the hearing.
Yep.
And Mr. Novak.
I'd support a motion to close the hearing. I think the reason in deal work we always use the term fatal flaws is because it's the right term. You can have 50 great things about a proposed purchase, and if there's a fatal flaw, it doesn't happen because it's fatal. And I think this project has at least 2 fatal flaws and a third very serious one. And while I appreciate that they're close on certain aspects of septic and close on certain aspects of civil engineering, with no water and the septic in the interim well protection area for a restaurant, and no demonstration that they have the money to rebuild this necessary intersection, why are we here?
Yeah, I just think that there's, like I said, a lot of ground to cover.
Right.
Todd,
Yeah, I don't see a continuation of the public hearing bearing any fruit beyond what we've already seen and discussed.
given the current plan, is that what you're suggesting?
Yes.
What's been proposed?
Yes, based on all the information that we have to contemplate at this point in time.
Yeah. I think what stands out is obvious to me, and I'm a lawyer, I'm not a developer. I don't know everything, but what presents to me is that the density and the scale of this project presents really the biggest issues with both, water supply, nitrogen issues, where you can locate all the infrastructure. It seems to be a drastically reduced density project would move this in the direction to something that is plausibly approvable. That is what another development team has heard time and time again, and that's what they have responded with, and they are, moving in a direction towards an approval. So I would say that's my perspective. I want to hear others' perspectives on this before we vote on anything. Rick.
Well, you raise an interesting point, which is, I'll rephrase your question to me as, so, is there a scale at which this project could be approved? And without well testing up on that hill, my answer would be no. Because we don't even know.
We don't know. Yeah, we don't know yet.
We don't even know that the wells up there can support 2 more houses. 2.
Right, but we do know that, I'm just making up numbers.
Yeah.
14 or 16 beds is a dramatic reduction of need than
Sure. Right.
60 beds, right?
Right. Sure.
A lot less water, a lot less nitrates,
right.
A lot less infrastructure. So it's just a scale issue because you're trying to jam in a lot of units in the absence of any real information on both of those critical pieces, and the challenges become exponentially more difficult. So
I agree with you that certainly the smaller the project gets, the exponentially lower the problems get, because it's the reverse of if you make the project twice the size, it's 15 times the impacts.
I'm just dealing with our Title V regs, and I'm just applying it to the rubric of not even just theoretical, right? Just what we have to deal with in terms of what parameters we can make a decision from.
Right. But I don't think we can tell them, make the project 10 units. I don't think we have the legal right to do it, and if we did, I think we'd be bounced, and I'm not sure that would work.
I think we cannot tell them how to. We cannot tell them how to redevelop it, but or redesign it. But I think that's an obvious. It's a stating of the obvious.
I agree with you, sir.
Board members, any other comments? Jonathan, I know you both taught it, but I see Marion's hand raised. So after you both have an opportunity, I'd like to go to Marion.
And maybe it's not.
I don't know who's speaking.
Maybe I shouldn't be, but that we're sort of embarking on the most expensive and risky proposition by moving forward with EIAs as sort of close to 90% of our.
Who's talking?
Whoever's speaking, could you identify yourself, please? And
Scott on the iPhone, please mute yourself. You are not being recognized by the chair. Thank you.
There we go.
Yes.
Hear me okay?
I think it was Scott.
Oh, hi, Scott. Wait, Scott, if you're trying to speak, you're on mute now, and now we cannot hear you.
But I think Zach was asking the board members to speak up, not.
That's right. I was asking the board to speak, and then I saw Marion's hand was raised, and okay, Scott's after Marion, so board members and Marion, then Scott. Todd.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, it seems to me that we've begun to enter conversations that feel like deliberation.
Yeah. Look, I'm trying to be fair to the development team, to the applicant's purse, to our time. You know, to Rick's point, I see fatal flaws. I'm trying to figure out what the best and fairest approach is moving forward. So with that, I'm going to go to Marion and then Scott Horsley.
Thank you, Marion Neutra, 25 Prospect Street. Speaking for myself, not for any board. It seems to me that you've definitely done your duty to be responsive to the developer up to now, big time. And it seems to me that talking about redesigning the project at this point is, again, a waste of time. There's been plenty of time if they wanted to redesign the project to fit whatever water turns out to be there or not be there. They've had years to do that. And I hate to see you spend more of your valuable time hashing over details of this project. I think I urge you to follow your initial instincts at the beginning of this meeting. There are fatal flaws of the project as presented. It's not a time to redesign the project for the developer, and I would stick to your guns, basically.
Thank you, Marion. I appreciate your perspective. Scott, you're not on mute, it looks like, and you are ready to speak. So please, you have the floor.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I tried to unmute before, but I don't think I was able to unmute. Anyways, I guess I just have a couple of brief comments that I've submitted or provided information in the past on this, and everything has changed. And so there's really 2 points here. One is pretty clear to me that this site is within a quote nitrogen sensitive area. In fact, I would suggest probably at least 2 nitrogen sensitive areas. There are public water supply wells. There are interim wellhead protection areas, which, as the name implies, interim. The likely actual zone 2 areas are larger, include the site. So in that respect, we're in a sensitive area. And then secondly, it's also pretty clear that this section of town, in fact, most of the town, is run private septic and private wells, which also qualifies as a nitrogen sensitive area. So this site is a challenging site. And in my opinion, should address both impacts on public wells as well as private wells in the area. And then I don't know where the project stands in terms of access to its own water supply, but I had testified earlier about some comments and concerns about that as well in terms of impacts and drawdown on the wetland. And I don't know if anything has been done. I made some recommendations for the testing of impact on the wetland. So I think those are the 2 impacts that I see that, frankly, to my knowledge, has not been resolved. The water quality impacts associated with the septic, and then the hydrologic impacts on the water supply. And I'll stop there, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Scott. I appreciate the perspective. All right, I'm going to look to the board for next steps here. I think there was a proposal for a motion to close. Oh, there's another hand raised. Oh, Michael.
You have another hand raised, sir.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Michael.
Michael Lesser, 54 Forest Street, and a Conservation Commission member. I just want to bring up in the list of issues that are still outstanding that I might not be reading it correctly in this hurried moments, but it seems like there's still a number of stormwater issues that have just been put off in terms of when they would provide, or somehow that they will deal with the stormwater issues in some final plan. And it's not clear whether those will also be issues that might be a little bit more problematic than expected at the moment in terms of meeting the stormwater standards. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. I appreciate it. Board members.
Zach, first of all, I believe we should not be speculating on how this plan could be changed in the future to make it possibly more acceptable. We have no idea if any such plan exists, and I would not favor encouraging the applicant to take any steps in response to those comments. This is a fatally flawed plan. I think we should close the hearing and, in your discretion, Zach, take a vote on the application.
I think we're going to close the public hearing tonight. I think that seems to be where the direction the board wants to go. I agree with Jonathan. I also appreciate the guidance that we shouldn't be speculating on how to make the project work. That's just my pathological need to try to make everyone happy, which is not necessarily what's the best for the town here, or from a legal perspective. So I think I'll entertain a vote to close the public hearing, but I will not entertain a vote for the deliberation piece tonight. That's sort of where I'm at. Mr. Novak.
Mr. Chair, I move that we close the public hearing for the remainder 41 North Main Street project.
I second that.
Seconded.
Thank you, guys.
Do I have a vote by roll? Mr. Fitch.
Fitch, aye.
Mr. Labby.
Labby, aye.
Mr. Novak.
Novak, aye.
Mr. McBride, aye. Public hearing is closed on this matter. We will set a time to deliberate. I don't know procedurally if we have to set that right now in the public hearing. We may have to do that. We might want to also wait and schedule a deliberation time and date that is for potentially both projects. I don't know if that works for this. If that works, if we have to set the deliberation meeting now. Rick, I don't know what your thoughts are.
Well, but Paul will probably correct me. I don't think we have to set the deliberation date now. I think it would be courteous to the applicant and maybe good comedy if we could do so, just because I'm sure as we're doing our deliberation, people will want to watch us and it'll be easier for them to keep track if we set a date tonight. Mr. Haverty, how did I do?
Mr. Novak, I believe that you are absolutely correct. I don't think that there is a requirement that you announce the date of your deliberative hearing. It's an administrative process. It just has to be done in public. It can't be done in a closed session, but you aren't required to announce it at this stage. However, it is definitely something that would be appreciated if we were provided that information so that we can set our schedule and make sure we have the opportunity to view it.
Yeah. Thank you, Paul, and thank you, Rick. I think we're gonna with that we voted. The public hearing is closed. I'm gonna wait till after the next matter to set the date to which I believe will be the next deliberation opportunity for this matter, and we will move on to the next matter on our agenda tonight before we set the date for our deliberations on this matter. So with that, I'm going to reopen the public hearing on Chapter 40B comprehensive permit for Brush Hill, Phoenix Partners. The address escapes me, but we all know what we're talking about. And I believe the applicant team is here. And so, Bob, I see you're here with a new background. Maybe you're in a nice warm place. No. Okay. So, Bob, any updates substantively besides Mr. Hill's letter, which I will address momentarily?
Sure. The only update I have is that the Board of Health, 2 nights after your last meeting, did meet and do a final review and voted to approve the Title V application for the 12-bedroom septic system that's in front of you tonight. So Board of Health has approved the Title V system. And then with regard to the Dan's letter, as you might imagine, I have much to say about that.
I did see an email come through. I have not read it. I have
Yeah,
much to
no,
say,
no,
but
no,
I
I-
have a lot. I would prefer if you would withhold your comments because I have my own, if you don't mind.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, yeah, no, I was just asking process-wise, if and when we'll be able to comment, and it's
Yeah, you will in a moment, but I don't want anyone to believe that you're leading me to what I'm about to say,
Sure.
which is clear frustration with Mr. Hill at what he submitted, because I think he knows as well as the rest of us do, lawyers, that a lot of what he requested is not enforceable. And we postponed this hearing for thoughtful, enforceable conditions. And I don't believe that that's what was submitted to us. And I just want to make clear that I don't appreciate that. I appreciate that Mr. Hill is advocating for his clients zealously, which is great, but there is an awareness of what we actually have the authority to do. And so, for instance, and I would say this, the first condition I find and I take issue with, because it's saving an ash tree in a traveled way when there's ash borer all over town, killing all of our ash trees, and we're supposed to keep a tree that's going to die in a traveled way. So that's just, to me, that's the tip of the iceberg of part of the problem of what we've received. And I hope that moving forward with other applications and other advocacy by council, that we are, moving more towards the path of what this board can actually enforce versus what is a wish list for the abutters. So with that, Bob, what do you have to say about Attorney Hill's letter?
I think you've kind of said it, and we didn't talk in advance. And in fact, in the email I sent to the board a half hour ago, I used the exact wish list word. So I'll just leave your comments, because I got into more detail in the email about what I thought. There were things in the letter that were acceptable, and they were acceptable, frankly, because they were based on federal, state, and local regulations, and I was accepting of those. So you'll see, I did a whole analysis and kind of accepted. I don't know what the percentage is, but then there's a lot of stuff that frankly is not based on any requirements on folks who are building, otherwise building 4 single-family homes in Sherborn. So anyway,
I actually find, and I'm just gonna say this, I find the preservation of an ash tree in town to be actually dangerous, as one fell on my tractor 2 months ago as I was mowing the lawn, because I'm not allowed to cut them down, and that's a different issue. But I think that there's some things that are just not appropriate, and I can't underscore that enough, that I have a real issue with the wish lists. This is not something that I wake up in the morning to want to do and sort through all this material. And so I really would appreciate moving forward if we can be a little more realistic with what we're asking for. So with that, I will turn it over to Attorney Hill and to talk about the ones I think I'd like you to highlight, the ones that you think are grounded in local and federal and state law, not wish list items that you think are the most important, top 5, because I'd like to move forward with the discussion other than that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is Dan Hill. I'm an attorney, and I represent the 2 direct abutters, the Lauterbachs and the Natals. I'm sorry you felt that my list of conditions was inappropriate. Most of the conditions that are in my letter, I think there's like 67 conditions. Most of them are boilerplate conditions that I've used as special counsel to zoning boards around the state. A lot of those conditions came directly from my letter to this board about 8 years ago. As Rick may recall, the fields of Sherborn. As an attorney who's been doing this line of work for over 20 years, Chapter 40B work, I know exactly, Mr. Chairman, what is defensible and enforceable and what isn't. I would not have put in this letter a condition that I thought was non-defensible. I understand that people can disagree what's defensible and what's enforceable. Certainly the Housing Appeals Committee has a different view than I do. But the Housing Appeals Committee is not the final say either. With respect to the ash tree condition, I'm not an arborist, so you may know more than I do about ash trees. Perhaps they're considered to be junk trees. I don't know that. What I do know is that it's a mature tree. It's a specimen tree that's on the property boundary shared with my client, Dennis and Vicky. If you came out to the site, you would have seen this beautiful tree in their backyard, and it's important to them. It's a very common condition in 40B permits around the state to preserve existing trees to the extent possible, and that was the motivation behind that condition. Simply that the driveway could be aligned to be as far away from the root system of that tree as possible. I don't think it actually adds any cost to the developer. It just basically shifts the driveway a little bit to the left to avoid those roots, and then it can come back into the center line. Along those lines, we actually thought it would be more appropriate to have the driveway in the center of the 50-foot strip rather than up against the Louderback's property, which is mostly where it is. I don't really understand the rationale for that. So that was another comment on the driveway.
Just for the public's education on ash tree situations, we have a blight of ash borer. It's a beetle, girdles the tree from the inside. Ash trees are particularly dangerous when they die because they get brittle and they break from the top down, and they are particularly dangerous when they are dead and standing. And so this is where I take a particular issue with the condition, because you're asking to keep a tree that's, I guarantee you, will be dead in 5 years no matter what you do. And you can I'll bet you $20 on that. That's in a public hearing. You can call me out on that. It will be dead in 5 years, and it will be a hazard to that roadway. So that unfortunately, that was the first condition I read, and I had issue with the first one. So I did read the rest on the plane this morning. I was not, construction fencing with canvas coverings doesn't seem to be something that we require of other homes, other non-affordable developments in town. So these are just things that, I think that provide fodder for, if I were to grant them, would provide fodder for the development team.
Yeah, so I think along those lines, and the theme, I think what I'm hearing is that you believe that conditions that are in my list, for example, that may exceed what the planning board might impose on a conventional subdivision. I guess my response to that would be this project is more dense than what would be allowed conventionally under any kind of special permitting or subdivision context. And therefore, with that greater intensity of use of the project site, comes with it the need to provide more protections for environmental interests, but also for screening for the existing neighborhood and protecting their wells and protecting their septic systems. So that was really the motivation behind a lot of the conditions that may go beyond what Sherborn might typically require in a more conventional context. But just going back to yeah, Rick, do you wanted to jump in? You're on mute.
I was saying when you're done, Dan.
Okay. So just going back to the project specific conditions, under number 1, we're actually proposing that there be 4 design modifications. Again, the driveway being in the center line. And we also think that the house number 1 can be moved towards the, I don't know my directions on the plan by heart, but more to the left. If you're looking at it from Brush Hill Road, and that the houses be pushed back, and the driveway be pushed back from the property lines. I mean, I think from my last comment letter that it just felt really strange to me that the developer had proposed their project driveway virtually on the property line, which doesn't seem necessary. And doesn't seem that neighborly. And so we had proposed and requested that everything be pushed back by 20 or 30 feet to provide some additional buffer to allow for screening. It would allow for a reasonable space to plow snow. If snow is plowed on the driveway as it's currently designed, it's going to be plowed onto my client's properties. And that's just not reasonable or fair. So we asked for that change. And we also suggested that the wells be relocated so that the full 150-foot radius around those wells would remain on the project site and not overlap onto my client's properties, which would then essentially impose an encumbrance on their properties, which is not reasonable. So I think those are the main project specific conditions. And most of the other conditions, again, are sort of boilerplate, dealing with construction hours, blasting, excuse me, blasting conditions, conditions.
Is there a local ordinance on, when folks can work and make certain noise? I didn't know if we had a Wellesley leaf blower ordinance in town that I'm not aware of. But Brick, you're on mute.
I think there's an easy way through the thicket here, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
We're under no obligation to adopt any of Mr. Hill's proposed conditions. That's not to say I'm against them all, just that's the legal fact. And we have several other projects that we have approved with extensive and detailed and lengthy conditions. And I think Mr. Haverty and Mr. Hill have been involved in some of them, certainly the field of Sherborn. And it would seem to me that we asked Hill for his proposed list of conditions. He gave it to us. So we don't love them all. That's okay. Maybe we hate them all. That'll be up to us in our deliberations. But my point is, with the prior decisions written by the board for the other projects, I think there is a critical mass of fairly well-established conditions we can draw upon to pick and choose. And therefore, we don't need to hash them all through tonight.
No, I guess my one question to Mr. Hill, and if you don't have the answer tonight, that's fine. But besides the aesthetics and the nuisance issues, is there a health and safety condition that you are top 2 or 3 that you would like us to particularly focus on in our deliberations, which are going to commence soon?
Well, the health and safety issue is our wells, and condition number 42 on my list mirrors the language that I already provided you, frankly, on what we think is an appropriate level of well testing prior to the project having occupancy. So 42, 43 deal with those issues. Some of the condo regulations touch on that as well to ensure that the project has adequate reserves in the capital account for replacement of the septic system and for dealing with issues with wells and septics. Yep. That's under section G. But yeah, I mean, I think that's the biggest public health and safety issue. And the only other really kind of project related conditions that we included, we had to do with landscaping, because I don't think we've seen a landscaping plan, which is fine. And I recognize that it's a small project, so we don't need a lot of attention to a landscape plan, but this is a big issue for my clients because basically a road is going to be going in an area that's currently woods, and there'll be a significant disruption to what they currently experience. So we're asking for landscaping. We've given you what we'd like to see, but we also recognize it's your decision, and you need to make a decision that's in the best interest of the town of Sherborn.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate your perspective, and I appreciate the feelings of the abutters. I do. I empathize with them. I looked for land that had conservation next to me for a reason. I wanted privacy, and I guess for better or worse, maybe the land next to me has already been tested and done. Maybe it's not. But if something were to be built, I can plant trees on my property too. And I guess I can't impugn our decision based on the perspective of an abutter that is frankly just unenforceable, given the law of Massachusetts. And so, I appreciate it, but I think that's sort of where we are. So there really is no new information besides Attorney Hill's letter and the Board of Health's vote of last week. Is that correct, applicant development team?
Yes, I believe that is correct, Zach.
Andrew, I see your hand is raised. I don't know if you have something to say.
Yeah, thanks, Zach. I just also want to bring your attention and the attention of the members of the Zoning Board of Appeals to a letter that I also sent in with photographs of what this driveway would look like from both our property and also the Natal's property. It's quite a scar, and it goes the entire length of our property, and we respectfully seek to have fencing and landscaping so we're not looking at traffic and noise and dealing with noise anytime somebody drives on that driveway. So
I respectfully, I agree. I respect your position and your opinion, Andrew, and I empathize with how you feel about this project. That being said, these are not health and safety items that are necessary or conditions that would, you know, sort of allow the project to work. And so I'm personally not going to be comfortable imposing, you know, certain landscaping plans in non-sensitive areas just because I don't think we have the authority to do it. I'm sure Rick will tell me otherwise if I do. But I would like to, you know, I don't have an executive order privilege, so I can't just make things happen the way that I want them to happen. That's not the tools that I have in my tool shed right now. So.
Okay, I have a short comment, Zach.
Yes, Jonathan.
The developer has already indicated that there are some items in Mr. Hill's letter that are acceptable to him in his discretion. And I think that that's where it sits. Let Mr. Murchison, with consideration of the feelings of his abutters over certain issues, decide which ones are important or not important to him, and make a decision. I mean, it doesn't come down to enforceability if he consents to those conditions. I mean, I too was winded by the 18-page letter. I couldn't believe it, frankly. So I think that's where I would leave it.
Mr. Hill, I hope you don't take offense to my strong words, but I do appreciate your advocacy. But I think if you're before us again, I hope that we can whittle that list down to something that seems to be a little more on point. That being said, as I'm losing my voice, do I have a motion to close this public hearing unless there's any other comments or questions from the board or the public? Mr. Novak.
Mr. Chairman, I move to close the public hearing for Brush Hill Homes.
I second that motion.
Wonderful. Vote by roll. Mr. Fitch.
Yes.
Mr. Labby.
Aye.
Mr. Novak.
Aye.
Mr. McBride, aye. Public hearing for Brush Hill Homes is closed. For deliberations board members, I'm hoping that we can do something in the mornings now that Mr. Novak and Mr. Fitch are, I guess, retired or enjoying the leisure time of their latter years. Maybe we can do a morning deliberation session that makes it my life a little bit easier sometimes if it's like around 8 on a Friday. But that's my preference for the deliberations. We can do maybe an hour, you know, a couple of Fridays to handle some stuff. That's my perspective.
I have no problem with that, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, early.
Yeah. So I propose that our deliberation on 41 North Main and on Brush Hill, I don't know the address, I apologize, Bob, we'll commence this Friday at 8 a.m.
I'm unavailable, Mr. Chair.
Next Friday at 8 a.m.
That is vacation week. I'm also going to be out of state.
So Todd, we're burning some days here. So what's your first available? Gene, we don't have any meetings next week, do we?
No.
I can do it. We can do an evening next week, Todd. I know you're on vacation every night.
Well, mornings would be better then. How about the 21st, a week from this Friday? Does that work? Or is that too far out? Do we need to pull it up earlier in the week of the 17th?
We've got 20 days from when we closed the hearing for both of them to render a decision. Mr. Haverty will shout me down if I get that wrong.
So if we,
but I think I have it right.
If we meet the 21st,
No.
we've burned 10 days.
Oh, hold on, I got it wrong. Go ahead, Paul.
You have 40 days from the close of the public hearing to render a decision.
To render a decision.
Correct.
I'm delighted to be wrong. Thank you, Paul.
And rendering a decision means you actually take your vote. And then from the time that you actually take your vote, you have 14 days to file a decision with the clerk's office.
Thank you very much for the rules.
You're
Appreciate
welcome.
it.
How about the 24th, the morning of the 24th? I can't do that vacation week.
Morning of the 24th. I could do the morning of the 24th.
That works
I
for me
can
as
probably
well.
do 8 to 9 on the morning of the 24th, and I have a bunch of people with trucks coming to irritate John by emptying out my barn.
I'll be gone.
All right, so
good.
We
We'll
will
put it all in your. We'll put it all on your porch. That's my plan.
Okay. All right.
All right, so the 24th at 8 a.m. is when we will commence deliberations for 41 North Main and for Brush Hill. 8 to 9. 8 to 9. And then
would you like a motion?
I would like a motion.
I move that we schedule the deliberation sessions, initial deliberation sessions for both 41 North Main Street and Brush Hill Homes on the morning of Friday. No, is that Monday, February 24th?
Monday the 24th.
Monday,
at 8
February
a.m.
24th, 8 a.m.
Seconded.
And that Jeannie post that.
Wonderful. Seconded. Vote by roll, Mr. Fitch.
Aye.
Mr. Labby.
Labby, aye.
Mr. Novak.
Novak, aye.
Mr. McBride, aye. And can I get a third motion? Motion to adjourn. I will move to adjourn this meeting.
Second.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Quick second. Mr. Fitch.
I vote yes, adjourn.
Mr. Labby.
Labby, aye.
Novak.
Aye.
Mr. McBride, aye. Meeting is adjourned. I will talk to you all, gentlemen, on the 24th. Todd, enjoy your vacation. And
thank you very much to both applicant teams.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Good night.
Thank you.